Good evening, and welcome back to 31 Horror Nights. It's October 28th, and tonight's movie is The Exorcism of Emily Rose. This is the last of the 5 quasi-sort of, not really horror movies I'm going to be watching this month. The Exorcism of Emily Rose does have some elements of horror, but mostly it's a courtroom drama that sort of has a horror movie attached to it. The Exorcism of Emily Rose is directed by Scott Derrickson, who also directed Sinister, which I saw earlier this month and didn't really like. So I wasn't expecting much out of it. But I watched it, and it surprised me by not only being a lot better than I expected, but by also being one of my favorite movies I've seen this month. The Exorcism of Emily Rose gets a 9 out of 10 for me. It has a great story, great characters, great acting, and it has some great horror in it too. The story involves a priest being sent to court for criminal negligence of a young girl, Emily Rose, a 19-year-old girl who he was performing an exorcism on and it didn't work, and the next day she died. He's not being charged with murder or even manslaughter, but the family admits that they put her in his care, so he's being charged with negligence, letting her die. They had a scene of whoever is up to deciding who picks the prosecutor in cases like this. The group of people are all discussing it, and they picked this one particular lawyer who, besides being very aggressive in the courtroom, is also a devout Christian. So they pictured that the public would view him as impartial in this case. It was the Catholic Church that picked the lawyer that would be defending the priest, and they went with Aaron, who is this up-and-coming, hotshot, ambitious lawyer who got a lot of attention the previous year when she got a man accused of murder to be acquitted. The church wants the priest to plead guilty and have a plea bargain to save face, or at least save as much face as they can at that point. The priest, however, refuses to budge on the matter and insists on pleading not guilty. So basically, it's up to Aaron, the lawyer, to work with him so that they can craft a case as to why he shouldn't be arrested for criminal negligence. What makes things a little bit more interesting is that Aaron is an agnostic, and a lot of the details of the case involve a lot of religious and spiritual things, so she has to work with that in order to make her case. The movie is about not only the trial itself, but also truly getting to the bottom of what exactly happened to Emily Rose in the weeks leading up to her death. While mostly a courtroom drama, a lot of the flashbacks do have horror elements to it. And strangely enough, the scares in this movie were subtler and more effective than the scares in Sinister, which was supposed to be a horror movie from beginning to end. This movie also has way less dark shots than Sinister did. I mean, there are some, but it's not the total epidemic like it was in Sinister. I want to say that the acting was great across the board in this movie. Everybody did a great job, especially Laura Linney, who played Aaron. I will also like to say that Jennifer Carpenter, while not looking young enough for the part, she was 25 at the time and definitely looked it, absolutely killed it as Emily Rose. She did a really good job with that performance. However, more than that, I would just say that the characters are really well written. Everybody's developed, fleshed out, and has reasons to do what they do. The prosecuting attorney really does want justice to take its course because he sees this priest as someone who's giving his religion a bad name. Erin, on the other hand, starts out basically just wanting to win the case, but as the movie goes on, she gets more and more invested in not only the life of the priest, but also the life of Emily. It was all very interesting, and it was done in a very, natural, flowing way, going from her just seeing this as a job to this becoming a lot more personal to her. I will say that there were a few things that happened in the court that sort of took me out of the realism of the whole thing, because for the most part they do try to play it very normal, like the objections, the talking with the judge. It all feels very real. I mean, I've never actually been to a trial, so I wouldn't know for sure, but for the most part it feels natural, except for a few things, like some of the witnesses that are brought to the stand, some of the evidence that is presented. You just get the feeling that this wouldn't really fly in real life, or at least not as well as it does in the movie. I kind of compare it to Dolores Claiborne, at least the book, where, you know that what's happening is the right thing because, you know what's true and what's not, but you kind of feel like in real life this isn't how it would go down, nor should it. A very interesting thing in this movie is listening to the back and forth between the two lawyers. They're both presenting their cases, and you can feel the tides, shift in one's direction or the other, and you can, feel the mood of the room change. The situation is also very interesting. What the defendant has to, sort of convince the jury is not that Emily Rose was definitely possessed by a demon, but she has to convince them that the priest legitimately cared about her well-being, and that whether she was actually possessed or not, her death wasn't his fault and that everything that they were both doing was something that they thought was right and they had every legal right to do. It was a very interesting concept to hear people analyze and discuss throughout the movie. Overall, The Exorcism of Emily Rose is a very compelling and very well-crafted drama, and it does have some good elements of horror in it. Much like Contagion, all the way from the beginning of this month, this is something I would recommend for people who want to watch something a little bit scary, but horror movies aren't exactly their thing. This is a pretty good hybrid between a horror movie and a legal drama. It definitely wasn't without flaws, but the good stuff in it outweighed the bad stuff in it, and then some. This is a movie that I would recommend. Alright, now let's talk about a few spoilers. There are two main pieces of evidence that the defense uses to form their case. The first one is a tape recording of the exorcism, so that everybody could at least have some glimpse into what it was like. As the audience, we actually see the whole exorcism go down, and I have to say, that might actually be the most intense exorcism I've ever seen in a movie, more so than The Exorcist or The Last Exorcism. It was pretty intense. The other key piece of evidence is a letter that Emily Rose herself wrote to the priest on the day before she died. It talks about a near-death experience she had and how she says that she saw the Virgin Mary and talked with her about it. And she was told that she could either choose to leave her body and be free of this stuff forever or stay. But even though she will suffer, her story could inspire a lot of other people to believe. She chooses to stay in hopes that while she's still alive, her story can inspire other people to change the way that they view the world. Is this cheesy? Absolutely, totally. But I still thought it was really nice. The little speech that Erin makes for her closing argument was something that I really loved. The entire thing was sort of, I'm not expecting you to believe the story of her being possessed by a demon and trying to get exorcised. What she was trying to argue is that there were no, actual facts that can be believed beyond any reasonable doubt that support the case of the prosecutor. The case that, Emily Rose was just, schizophrenic or epileptic and she needed medical care, and the priest refused to give it to her. She didn't completely dismiss that as something that's totally wrong. She said that there is not evidence beyond a reasonable doubt supporting it. And she also says that there isn't evidence beyond a reasonable doubt supporting her story about the exorcism. What she wanted to emphasize is that there's still a possibility. She didn't really know what happens, and she doesn't expect the jury to actually know what happened either. But she wants them to look at the evidence and make the decision that they think is right. What happened next, I will admit, is pretty stupid, but the jury apparently deliberates and they come to their conclusion, and the spokesperson for the jury says that they actually found him guilty of criminal negligence. But when the judge is trying to come up with a sentence, one of them says, "Can we make a suggestion?" And then she says yes, and then they suggest that his punishment just be time served, because throughout most of the movie he was staying in prison. The judge agrees to this, so basically he was found guilty, but he wasn't actually given any punishment. At least not any punishment beyond what he would have gotten if he was found innocent. I don't really think that that was the way to go. But this kind of does help the movie sort of end on a bittersweet moment. Erin does not view this as a victory for her, even though the priest pretty much went free. She focuses more on the fact that she wasn't able to convince the jury to just let him off. In fact, when the leader of the firm that she's working for offers to make her, senior partner afterwards, she declines the offer, thinking that she didn't really earn it. The movie ends not with her becoming, a born-again Christian or, a convert, but she definitely thinks a lot more about the spiritual than she ever had. The last shot in the movie was something that I really liked. Throughout the entire movie, they talk about, the witching hour. There's, several times when somebody is just woken up all of a sudden at 3 a.m., and at one point, her alarm clock stops at 3 a.m., and that actually causes her to be late for the trial that day. So at one point, you see her, turn her clock around because she's kind of scared of it. But at the very end, you saw her look at it and then turn it back so that she could look at the numbers again. That, I definitely thought, was a nice touch to end the movie on. The Exorcism of Emily Rose serves not only as a pretty good horror movie, but also a very compelling drama. I really liked watching it. I thought it was interesting. I enjoyed it. I liked the characters and the acting. This is something that I would recommend to everybody, not just people looking for a good scary movie. Alright, I'll see you tomorrow.